So in the previous series of this, what we did is we built out this full rig. So we have a character that is fully movable, fully customizable. But one of the things that I did leave out, if we look under the geometry, is there is a section here for props. So what we're going to take a look at is creating some basic prop rigs here to get this set up and within our system. Now, what are the first steps to creating our props? Well, we actually need to get these bound into the skin. So let's go back into the skinning file to add these in. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new scene, or not a new scene, but rather our skin rig scene, come into our final skin rig and just open this up. We're not going to save. And what I need to do is just add in some joints for these guys. Now I can do these one at a time if I would like. So we could either do the geometry once or twice, whatever we want to do. We could even separate these out if we wanted to sword geo and non-sword geo, whatever we want to do. Let's start with the sword. I'm just going to go turn off the visibility. In the instance of the sword here, the pivot's already where it needs to be. So I'm going to come into my rigging skeleton. We're going to create a joint here, and I'm just going to make it a bit bigger, maybe like 2. And for this one, I'm going to select the actual object. I'm going to shift select the joint, do constrain parent, and just uncheck maintain offset. That'll make this jump right to the pivot, and if that's where I want it to be, that'll be what we need. So we'll just go ahead and make this our sword skin joint, and you're probably thinking, hey, that's not a sword. We want the joint to represent the object. Now with this, I can just select this joint. I can shift select this here. We can do a quick skin, bind skin. And what that should do is just bind this whole object to this joint. If we want it to follow the hierarchy for whatever reason, we can parent it back into the root here. It's not always necessary, but it can be a nice practice to do. Now, why did I do that by hiding the other one? Because these are going to technically overlap. Right? They're going to be on top of each other. And it's very common to just kind of put them at the center of the world for whatever reason. It just makes it easier for reset and for parenting and all sorts of stuff. So let's go ahead and create a joint for this one. Same story here. We're just going to select this one, shift select that one. We'll do a constrain parent with maintain offsets. We'll delete the constraint on the joints. And we can go ahead and rename this shield underscore joints. And if we would like, we can go ahead and give this a 1.5 size maybe, so we can see the difference between the two. But we'll go ahead and take that, take the shield, we'll do a skin, bind skin, and that will now be bound. So this joint will now be in charge of the shield, or at least it should be. Now, why isn't it? That's a good question. The reason it's not is because it's not really within the volume. The other thing is maybe I actually don't want it to be in this exact spot for the shield. So I might undo to unbind. And one of the things, actually, no, that is correct. That's where the hand's going to go. So yeah, we do want that bound. Let me make sure that this is still bound. But if you do skin something and it's not bound, it generally means that the joint didn't get added or it doesn't have influence. So if we did do that correctly, and let me just undo a little bit here. I'll undo till we know we are binding. So I'll take that joint and then shift select the shield. So shield joint to the shield. Do a constrain or skin, bind skin. All right, let me see, make sure. Yeah. So if that didn't work, let's go ahead and come in here to our skin. We can go ahead and do a skin paint weights. So skin paint skin weights. And if we look at this, there should be a joint, but you'll notice there's not. So this is an interesting issue. This does have a skin cluster, has no joints. What we can do is we can take that joint, we can shift select this object. We can come into our skin and we can do an add influence. So we can go ahead and do a edit influences, add influence. And that should force this joint into the skin group. And what we should see now is that joint. Now, I don't know why we're not seeing that, if I'm going to be honest. It's a little bit weird that it doesn't want to go. The reason it generally doesn't want to go is it's not detecting it as within the volume. We could potentially change the location of the joint. That might do the trick. So let me go ahead and see if that maybe fixes it. Let's isolate these real quick and just kind of think about where I want this to go from. So generally speaking, the reason this happens is this is kind of out here floating in the abyss. What I could do is I could trick this to have another joint system in place if this is where I really want it to pivot from. I could also move this. I'll just snap to vertex there real quick, so that way it's at least in contact. And let's go ahead and select this, shift select that, and then do a bind skin, and just see if that magically does the trick. If it's proximity. All right. So that is the deal. It is proximity. Usually you can add these in. I don't know why Maya wasn't detecting it, but that'll be good enough for our shield joint, so I'm fine with that. So we're just going to leave that be, and we'll go ahead and add that back into the hierarchy up here. And I don't have an issue with that being the spot for the shield joint, because basically I just want the shield to move from where the hand's holding it, and that's close enough. All right. But that'll get us all set up. So let's go ahead and bring back the visibility for these. We can go ahead and save these. So just a quick save scene. That'll get our skin set. And we can go ahead and go back into our control rig and give these some basic controls. So let's get into our control rig here. Go to our work in progress 14. Go ahead and open this up. These should now be visible, in which case I also do want to make sure that they're attached to the geo, which they are. And let's go ahead and x-ray their joints and turn on the joints. So I'll need to turn on joints here to see this. Now this is where doing a cleanup after would be better in this particular instance, but we're just going to go with this for now. We're going to create new joints here to control the system. So basically I just need 2 of these guys. I'm going to turn off the geometry so that we are seeing the joints by themselves. And we'll just snap these to vertice to the location of these joints. We can then give these a name. This will be my sword CTRL joint. And this will be my shield CTL joint. All right, now the initial setup for these is pretty straightforward. We're going to parent these back into the control rig if possible, which can be a little bit troubling because I think the skin rig and the control rig are now kind of one. We could come into here under the joint system here and under the skin rig and just hide it. So just Control H, and then just tie this into here, into the actual control rig, like so. And we can set up some basic controls for these. Now, once again, it can be nice to toggle visibility on these. So let me go ahead and bring back in our geo, and we'll just come into the geometry here, and underneath here, we can toggle these one at a time. So I'll just go ahead and do the sword first here, and we'll be able to see that. So let's start out with a basic control. Since we got rid of our collection, I'm just going to do some basic nerves. We'll do a nerve circle here, snap it into here. We'll go ahead and make this 90 degrees. And make it a bit bigger for our sword, and then freeze transform. And then we'll do something kind of similar for the shield, but let's get the sword set up first. So all we're going to do for this is use a basic FK system. I'm going to go ahead and name this sword underscore CTRL for sword control. And we'll do our basic FK system. So we'll come into hypergraph hierarchy here. Go ahead and hit F, Control G to create a nice little null here. And we're going to just take this joint, shift select the null, do a constrained parent with that maintain offset off, hit apply. That'll jump to location. Take the sword control underneath that and freeze. And then we can just take the sword control back into here and do a constrained parent. And what we will see now, if we turn on our geometry, is a very basic system where this is going to control that. However, remember, we also need to tie this into the skin controls. So let's do that real quick. Let's go ahead and turn back on our skin joints. Let's go ahead and take this little out guy, make him control that. We'll go ahead and hit apply. And while we're here, we'll do the same for the shield so we don't have to do it again. All right, so now if I have this in place, there we go. We have our basic sword. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about prop functionality. What is one of the things this sword needs to do? Well, it needs to be able to follow the hand or not follow the hand, right? And right now it does a good job not following the hand, but it doesn't follow the hand. So we already know how to handle this, right? It's the same way we have done our other systems where we make it either follow or not follow. What we're going to need to do is come into our group here. We're going to need to create another group on top of this group, and we'll just call this the sword follow group. Now, what's unique with the sword, though, is that we might want it to follow different things. For today, we're going to keep it very simple, and it's either going to be in the character's hand or not. If we wanted to, we could also make it potentially follow the character's hip, depending on if the character has a sheath. But to be very straightforward and simple for this particular character, we're either going to have his little hand carrying it or not, because this character doesn't have a fancy outfit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to need to find those locators. And if you remember, I kind of put those in the do not touch, so we weren't able to see those anymore. And what we're going to need is basically a hand locator where we want this to follow, and we will need a world locator. Now, what we have to decide is if this is good enough here. Is this good enough for our follow group to follow? And I think it is. I think we could just use the wrist locator that we created and get away with that. Now, I do want to emphasize, if you want to use something other than a wrist locator, by all means do so. But I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. And what we're going to do is actually a full constraint today. So what that means is I'm going to select this locator here on the wrist. And make sure you're getting the locator. This can be a little bit tricky because the IK handle is also located right here. You want the locator. You want to come down here to the world. And then we're going to take that sword follow group and we're going to do a constrained parent. Make sure maintain offset is on and hit apply. Now, what this is going to do is something very important. It's going to make it so that this partially controls the sword. But you'll see by toggling the wrist locator to 0, it will follow the world. And by toggling the world locator to 0, it will follow the wrist. The animator will need to take the control and place it over here, which is an important factor to make it follow. But you'll see that will now follow this area. Now, the question, though, is what is following? And this is where things can get a little bit tricky. You'll see it's actually following from down there. Now, does that really matter that much? Not so much, because you'll see it's functioning as intended. But what can be a little bit tricky is when we come back to this follow group, technically what was following the world is this here. So this can be a little bit, wishy-washy in terms of the placement, but remember this moves independently. So in some ways, we're okay with that. It's just, important to understand that this is going to have its own set of struggles for the animator, depending on exactly what they're going to do. It's going to possibly require some counter animation. So it's not the most elegant solution to this problem because, like I mentioned, it can make things move around a lot, but animators can deal with that. They can figure out how to make this work the way they want. The main thing is this is going to give them a solid control that allows them to do that. Now, what's an alternative to this that could potentially solve this issue? A potential solution is to actually do the constraint differently. So let me delete that constraint and just kind of reset my follow group here and reset my control here. One of the ways we could do that differently is we could utilize a maintain offset turned off, meaning that, let me go ahead and get this set to 0. Turn our geometry back to invisible. We could come in here and select our control. We could shift select the world here, shift select this and do a constrained parent, but this time have maintain offsets. Have maintain offset checked off and hit apply. And what's going to be unique about this is when you have maintain offset turned off, is it makes these jump. So why is that significant? Notice the sword is halfway between here. So what that will do is if you're toggling the weight here between 0 and 1, is it jumps to the location of the world. Now, the reason this can be a little bit problematic is, even though we can kind of get things set up here, I'm also noticing it's not rotating with this, which is a problem in itself. I'll have to double check and make sure rotation was on. It's kind of interesting if it's not. What that will do now is toggling between these 0 and 1 is it will actually physically jump to the spot. Like I mentioned, this can be ideal. So it really kind of depends. It does make it so this follow group is in the location. So you have to decide if that's the kind of behavior you would want. Either of these does require counter animating. So that's something to kind of be aware of. And because this moves independently, the animator can always do that. Let's say we have this, stuck in the ground. Would it be easier for this to jump to the hand and to get it to location or not? And you'll see in this particular case, I've jumped to the hand and it's not even in the right spot anyway. So it's probably best to just not have it jump, right? So just kind of be mindful, we have tools that can allow us to do different things, right? We just need to think what's going to be best there. Now, I'm going to undo this until I get back to the old setup I had, because that one was working just fine. And if I'm correct, it's working with rotation. So we're going to do it with the maintain offset on, but I did want to show you that you can do it with either. So let's go ahead and just get this back to its starting position here. And let's go ahead and program who it follows with. And we'll put this directly onto the sword control. So that way the animator can control it here. All right. Now with this, we don't need scale or visibility. So I'm just going to lock these as I go. and we can do an edit add attribute right on top of here. And we'll just go ahead and do a follows, or we could say, you know, parent to hand or world, just like we've done before. We can do a minimum of 0, a maximum of 10. We can click add, and we can get the sets. So now we're just going to do a set driven key. So we'll just go to our animation menu, key, set driven set. We'll load this as the driver, and then we'll load its constraint here as the driven. And we'll just determine who it goes to first. I'm going to actually leave it at the world by default. So we'll go ahead and hit key on that. And then we can go ahead and switch to parent to hand when it is at 10. And go ahead and switch that to 1 and 0 and key. And what that should do now is give us a way to parent this to the hand or to the world. Now, I am noticing it's having some weird behavior here. I think that's just because it's not parented to the hand yet. So that could be a factor. But it should work, right? So main thing is if we're going to have it in that location, we're going to want to move it to the hand here and then have it parent. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's probably more elegant ways to rig this than what I'm showing you guys. There's a lot of different systems and stuff we can put in place, but my goal is not to show you something super complicated. It's just to show you how to get this thing to work, right? So now at this point, we have a character. He's got his little weapon in place. So the shield's going to be the exact same setup here. Let's go ahead and just reset this. And, you know, like I mentioned, clean up as we go. One thing I might want to do is kind of color code these. So if I wanted to, I could indicate which hand. So that's something I didn't really kind of mention. This character's right-handed. So I might want to edit attribute here and parent to R hand, right? Kind of important. If I do that, let's keep the color coding. You know, let's go ahead and say, okay, this goes into the right hand. This is going to be red. Could I do a left-hand parent, right-hand parent? Yes. I'm going to leave that up to you guys if you want to handle it, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay? So let's go ahead and do the shield next. Let's go ahead and just toggle its visibility to on. And do the same song and dance here. I'm going to go ahead and just isolate these so I can see them a little bit better. Create ourselves a NURB circle. Snap this into that bad boy and then scale it to be the size of the shield. That looks pretty cool. So we'll freeze transform. We'll go ahead and make this our shield CTRL, and then we'll just go ahead and set up our basic FK system like we know how to do. Go ahead and create our null. Take our joint to our null, constrain parent, maintain offset, apply. Delete that, parent the shield underneath, freeze its transforms, and then reset our constraints real quick here. So reset that tool. Might as well leave it open because we're going to be using it a lot. And we'll just take this and control here to the shield, apply, and ta-da, the shield works. All right, let's put that group above it, control G. I will need to snap to vertex on this one to make sure it's in the right spot. And we're just going to make this our shield follow group. Just like we did before, we're going to come in here to the locators. So let me go ahead and hide the geometry. Come down here to our base locator for the world. Shift select that shield follow group and do our constrained parent. And we'll go ahead and give it a similar name to this. So we did parent to our hand or world. We'll go ahead and edit add attributes. Parent to L hand or world. We'll do a minimum of 0, a maximum of 10. We'll go ahead and click add. That'll work. Now we just need to give it functionality. So let's come in here to our key, set driven key, set. Load this as the driver. Grab our parent to L hand or world. Load this as the driven. Go ahead and toggle these. Remember, we're going to leave it on the world by default. Go ahead and hit key. And then we'll go ahead and crank that up here to 10 so it can follow. And then we can go ahead and set this to 1 and 0. And click key, and we're good to go. All right, let me go ahead and lock and hide what we don't need on this. And let's just go ahead and get this into position now, and the sword into position. And we should hopefully have a little character here that can wield a sword and shield, and that will get our prop set up. So this is just a very simple prop system, that allows them to hold and unhold props. It's not super elegant, and this is honestly something an animator could set up if they wanted to. It doesn't necessarily have to be set up by the rigger specifically. It's best if the rigger sets it up, but different shots have different needs, so it's important to kind of be aware of that these, may need adjustments. One thing I'm noticing with the shield here is I do need to position it a little bit more elegantly, and there we go. So now we can see, this coming into play here. We have the little character holding his shield. And the cool thing is I can put the shield in different spots, so it's, following the wrist. There's nothing to say that the shield needs to be held by the hand. It can be held by the wrist instead here, which probably isn't ideal, but it kind of looks better for this character. So, depending on how I have this set up, it gives us a little bit more flexibility here. One thing I might want to do with the shield in particular is maybe give its grip some skin controls, because looking at it here, there's going to be quite a bit of counter animating the animator might have to do to get this to look good, but sometimes we find that later. But you can see now the shield is working here, it's functioning, and we have what we need. So we're good. That is going to get our props up and running. Now, what we need to do is just kind of do our final cleanup, our final color coding. I'm going to switch this color here to be blue, so we know it's associated with the blue hand. Left side, we'll go ahead and bring these back on to our starting point. Like so. There we go. And kind of get these to go where they need to go. So these are part of the geometry system and control system. So we're going to add these into the rig. I'm just going to hit Control G. We'll call this our weapons. And we'll go ahead and parent this down into here, so that consolidates these. Now, since I organize these by groups, the do not touch, I can just set to a reference, and once again, toggle visibility. That shouldn't be an issue. The junk buddy joints, same deal, just set to a reference, toggle visibility. Now, the hard part's the controls and the geo, and whether or not we want the weapons to be visible at all times, or if we want the weapons to kind of be an on-off switch. And this is where we have to kind of determine that. Do we want to put that into the rig, or do we want to make that external? In this particular case, I think I'm going to add them to the rig because of what I want the rig to do. I'm just going to add attributes here, and I'm just going to call this weapons on-off. And what we'll do is we'll actually use a Boolean for this, just an on-off, and hit add. And we'll go ahead and set this to have a custom setup to toggle these. So what I'll need to do is just find the group for these, which I created, which is going to be the weapons here. And I might want to even create a subgroup, but I think just the weapons group is fine. We can come into our key set driven key. We can load this in as the driver, grab our weapons on off. Actually, you know what? Let's not even use a set driven key. This is a Boolean, so we could just do a general editor connection editor. That'll save us some time. We can load this in as the driver with weapons on off. We can come into the weapon control group here, and I might want to rename that, but we could go ahead and just come into visibility here, and we could just toggle the visibility. So that will go ahead and do an on-off switch for visibility on the weapons there. Pretty simple. And we'll just name this our weapons rigs. All right. And then what we could do is the same thing here, but with the geometry stack. So you'll see that we have a geometry stack here. We'll just reload right, and we'll just toggle visibility there. And that'll give us a visibility dial for the weapons to be on or off. All right. Keeps everything intact, everything nice and clean. So let's just double check that our controls are the only thing unlocked. Let's go ahead and lock down our geo, maybe turn off wireframe, turn on texturing so we see our final character, and do a quick save scene. We're going to save this as a new iteration on our control rig in case we need to come back to it, 15. And then we're going to go ahead and do a save as, and go ahead and save this into the master file here. the version 01. I might want to name this 02, but we're going to leave it at 01 and get that set. Now let's go ahead and open up our scene for our animation, our test animation, and just make sure that these work. As a disclaimer, do not jump with swords, do not jump with shields. It's not advised. All right, let's go ahead and enable this now. You'll see it's not keyed because it didn't exist. And this is the cool thing about referencing. We can go ahead and just key this in. Parent to hand is on, so I might want to change that in the master file. So it's not on by default, but we can go ahead and set that up there. We can do the same thing here. And if these are parented, we don't really need to worry about animating them, which is kind of nice. They're just going to go, and they're going to be set up already and ready to animate. So I don't really need to worry too much about that, and I can just hit play. And these should follow along with the animation, no problem. Now, why did that not continue? That's an interesting question. So what changed here and there? Very interesting. So I might have parented this to the wrong thing, which is what this is going to kind of come down to. Remember, I needed to parent to the hand locator. Maybe I didn't grab the locator, but I grabbed the IK handle. All right. This is why you want to test your animations. So let's just save this because we have those on now. And let's go back into our rig and let's just make sure we have that set up. Now, it's not really a whole lot to fix, which is nice, but we're going to go into our control rig, into our work in progress. Remember, you want to do the work in progress because your work in progress is where you work. Let's go ahead and toggle our visibilities and go ahead and just redo the shield. Now, the shield's going to be pretty quick. If I come in here to the general editor hypergraph hierarchy, and we look at this constraint here, we'll see that it's going between the wrist locator and the world for the sword. But if I find the shield, you'll see it's the IK handle in the world. Now I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to bring the weapon rig out of here as a group, so that way it's easier for me to see. And we're just going to get that set up once again. So let's turn back on our do not touch. Toggle our visibility on our geo so you can see what we're doing. And let me make sure I'm grabbing the locator, shift selecting the world, and then coming into that shield follow group and doing our constrained parent. Now this does require me to set up our controls again. So let's do that real quick. We'll just come in here to our key, set driven key set. And we already know how we're going to do this. So let me load this as the driver, have this set to world. And then the initial setup here is going to be 0 on the wrist, 1 on the world, and key. And then we're just going to switch that to 10 so it follows the hand. And we're going to go ahead and set that to 1 and 0 and hit key. And that should be good to go. Let's just double check it's following the hand, and it is. And then double check that it's going to follow the world here. And it is. And now we can go back to our test animation. Before we do, though, let's just do a little bit more cleanup. I did not put a space here, so I'm going to just go to edit attribute, and just go ahead and change the name so it has a space. There we go. And then the other thing is I didn't have these set to world by default, so let's set this to world by default, set the do not touch to reference, turn off visibility, turn back on visibility, and toggle this to off by default, and save. All right. Reason testing is important. Very, very easy to have a rig that looks good, but there's just something off that needs fixing. So let's go ahead and save that. Go back into our test file, and then we should have our final rig all done. So let's check out that test animation. And you can see why saving the test animation is nice and why referencing is nice. With referencing, we can very easily get this in here and we can see what's going on. All right, let me make sure that's set to 10. That's set to 10. Now the shield follows. Sword didn't. Why didn't the sword follow? Because its default value was set to 10 originally. We set it to 0. Now this should all be working. All right, so you can see we have our little character moving with our props. So that is going to conclude our rig here. We now have a full character rig that we built. We've introduced props for a left and right hand. We've built rigs that allow those props to either follow the character or follow the world. The last thing that I want to do is just kind of talk about cleaning up the final file before submitting and turning it in for review or for use within the industry. But hopefully this gives you an idea on the full process and allows you to start building some basic humanoid rigs for whatever kind of projects you want to do. So if you want to see the final stages on just kind of cleaning up the file for the purpose of publishing, join me in the next one. But at this stage, you're good to go. You can build little character rigs.